Well, good morning, everybody. We're still waiting for some other people to trickle in, but we're going to start for those of us that got here on time. My name is Hiebert. I work on Southeast Asia here at CSIS. It's a real delight to welcome all of you. We have a really interesting program this morning on the Philippines and the Millennium Challenge Account, in lessons in development. So we're going to do a deep dive on how the MCC program is going in the Philippines, and we've got a great lineup of speakers with us here today. But to kick us off, I'd like to welcome Ms. Dana Hyde, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Challenge Corp. And prior to taking this job about 2 years ago, she was Associate Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and earlier was at the State Department working on setting up the Office of the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources. Ms. Hyde, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, that's right. I am delighted to be here. Thank you, Murray. You have a wonderful panel for this conversation that will start shortly. And we are just happy to have, especially our team here from the Philippines, to celebrate the closeout. Now, the closeout, as many of you know, is the culmination of years of tireless effort on both sides of the world. And I really want to thank CSIS for hosting us today, and thank you all for joining us. As some of you know, the Millennium Challenge Corporation is a unique agency with an innovative approach to fighting global poverty. We invest in projects that lead to economic growth, and we help people and countries lift themselves out of poverty. Now, to maximize impact, MCC only partners with poor countries that meet rigorous standards for good governance, fighting corruption, and respecting democratic rights. And I know you will hear more about that specifically with respect to the Philippines this morning. Since 2004, MCC has committed roughly $11.5 billion in grants to countries around the world. And we're increasingly focused on Asia. MCC in the U.S. can play an important role in helping the region's emerging economies transition to sustained and inclusive economic growth. To date, we've signed large-scale partnerships, or compacts as we call them, not only with the Philippines, but also with Indonesia and Mongolia. And we are currently developing new compacts with Nepal, Mongolia, and a second investment with the Philippines. So as we turn our corner on the first investment, we're looking back and we're seeing what did we accomplish, what can we learn, and how do we replicate in the region this successful partnership. And you'll hear this morning, we pushed the envelope in a number of interesting ways in terms of sustainable and inclusive economic development in Compact 1. That included a significant investment in infrastructure, which is a hallmark of MCC's approach to laying the groundwork for growth. It also included difficult policy reforms around tax administration to help the Philippines itself mobilize its own resources for development. 2 specific projects generated more than $300 million in additional tax revenue since 2013. And finally, we embarked on an ambitious community-led development program known as CSIS, which scaled up existing Filipino development projects, small-scale infrastructure projects, and supported 4,000 communities, rural communities across the country. Ambassador Green and I are just recently back from the country, and we had the opportunity to visit some of these CSIS projects during our closeout celebrations in the Philippines, and to meet with the members of these communities, so we had a chance to firsthand see the effects. The people we met with were very compelling. They explained how they felt taking development into their own hands and how impactful the projects have been. In one particular village that I know will stick with me for a while, we had supported the community in building a footbridge to connect to 2 separate islands. One mother explained that she had given birth to her daughter on the old footbridge because she had been able to get across to the clinic in time to deliver the child. She named the child Bridget And Bridget was with us that morning, and to see what it meant to this community to have a safe and accessible way to reach healthcare really brought everything to life. So that is just one of the many stories that I'm sure Ambassador Green will add to when we talks about our trip there. There are many people to thank for what we've accomplished. Certainly when we were in Manila, we had a wonderful celebration that was hosted by President Aquino at the Presidential Palace, and it was an opportunity to congratulate those involved. But now that we're on our home turf, I want to take just a moment to thank some important folks. First of all, starting with the ambassador here, who was a personal champion for MCC's partnership with the Philippines and brought us to this day. Thank you. In the government itself, we had many important partners, including the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Department of Public Works and Highways, and the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Marivic down at the end, and the amazing staff of the MCA Philippines. One thing you'll hear about is that MCC implements really through a country team, a professional country team led by a board of directors, and we're fortunate to have many members of them with us here today. So thank you. And then we had many partners, international partners, some of whom are in the room today. Certainly the IMF, we worked with closely on the tax revenue project, the Treasury Department, USAID, and the Peace Corps. And finally, our own MCC staff, who will not be with us today. They're still back in Manila, but I want to thank John Polk and Barack. Their commitment is really what's gotten us here. So as we look ahead, many of you know that the board of directors of MCC met just over a year ago and selected the Philippines for a second compact. So while we are celebrating and closing out the first, we are also in the throes of our analysis about what we will do going forward. The government and MCC are working on their constraints analysis, which is the analytic tool that gets us there. It is a rare opportunity for us to continue to work with a strong partner and a dynamic economy like the Philippines. And if our first compact is any indication, we are really hopeful that we will be able to achieve some fantastic results there going forward. So I want to thank you all for being here and turn it over to the panel for the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dana. So as you've heard, we can probably see too that we have an excellent panel that will now continue the discussion. To kick us off will be Ambassador Jose Cuisia, who's been the ambassador of the Philippines here in Washington since 2011. I think all of you that work on Asia and probably even broader region know that Ambassador Cuisia is one of the more active ambassadors about town. He also happens to have the honor of being a CSIS neighbor, the closest neighbor that we have. Ambassador Cuisia has worked very hard on trade and investment issues, military security issues, and it's a real delight to welcome him back to CSIS. Ambassador Cuisia.
Thank you, Mary, for those very kind words. Ms. Dana Hyde, Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, Ambassador Mark Green, President of the International Republican Institute, Ms. Marivic Añonuevo, Managing Director of the Millennium Challenge Account-Philippines, Mr. Mary Hiebert, our moderator for today, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. I'm glad to see my colleague, the Ambassador of Myanmar, is here with us this morning, the President of the U.S.-Philippine Society, Ambassador John Maisto, and another board member, Dr. Henry Howard. And to all of you who are here, good morning, and thank you for coming here to listen to us. On May 24th, 5 years ago, President Benigno Aquino III led the national MCC closing event in the Philippines, where he also delivered a keynote speech. In that speech, the President said, and I quote, "Everyone who took part in the first MCC compact can take great pride in the fact that we were all good stewards. We chose to work together, we kept our word, and we were able to foster positive change," unquote. It is with great pleasure and pride, therefore, that I join this distinguished panel this morning. even if with a tinge of sentimentality, I'm very pleased that addressing you this morning and marking the successful closing of MCC 1 here in Washington, D.C., will be one of my last public engagements as Philippine Ambassador to the United States. As some of you may be aware, I will be departing Washington, D.C. at the end of the month, having then completed my tour of duty as President Aquino's envoy to the United States. I've been here for a little over 5 years and 2 months. So I've been probably one of the longest serving ASEAN ambassadors. I've been asked to provide the prospective Philippine government as one of the compact partners of the MCC. And having just concluded the first compact last May, I'd like to make 3 points this morning. These are observations that best describes how the Philippine government views its recently concluded first compact with MCC and how we might want to implement the second compact that we are currently developing together with MCC. First, you need the full commitment of the partner government. In order for any compact to be effective and successful, the partner government needs to be fully committed to work with MCC and be a genuine partner in harnessing the resources being made available in a way that unleashes its economic and developmental potential. This commitment is important because good governance and transparency are paramount hallmarks of an MCC compact. National and local community leaders will need to embrace the reforms that are required, adopt the best practices that MCC and other partners bring to the projects, ensure the absence of irregularities and corruption, and implement the projects with the highest standards of quality. The Philippines' experience is particularly unique in my mind because 2 of the 3 components of our first compact involved 2 of our more problematic agencies or departments in the past, to say the least. These were the Department of Public Works and Highways and the Bureau of Internal Revenue. But the results of the MCC projects were amazingly impressive and certainly in no small measure because of the leadership, integrity, and commitment of Secretary Rogelio Singson of the Department of Public Works and Highways and BIR Commissioner Kim Henares, respectively. It is clear, therefore, that it is crucial for the leadership of the partner government to be individually and collectively invested in the compact. President Aquino summed it up best in his speech. He said that the first compact was a manifestation of the trust that the United States had in the Philippine government. And then he said that this was a commitment to help, a commitment we swore to match by ensuring that every dollar spent would have a meaningful impact on the lives of Filipinos. Second, the compact should be designed in order to empower people and their communities. The first compact projects, particularly on infrastructure and its support for community-driven development, were transformative. They changed the lives of ordinary people and empowered them to create a better future that they can claim as their own. Again, as the President noted, the reforms introduced in tax collection has led to increased fiscal space for the Aquino administration and likewise to those that will come after this government. Apart from the good practices of transparency, women empowerment, and public-private partnership, more funds can now be allocated for projects and programs that will benefit more Filipinos, thereby empowering them as individuals and hopefully as communities. I recall Social Welfare Development Secretary Dinky Soliman telling me last year that the partnership with MCC also contributes to and strengthens the country's democratization process by empowering ordinary citizens to actively and directly participate in local governance. She deeply appreciated MCC's support for the Kalahi CI or SEEDS program the long name is Kapit Bisig Laban sa Kahirapan, Comprehensive and Integrated Delivery of Social Services, which is one of the 3 core social protection programs of Department of Social Welfare and Development in alleviating poverty. Finance Secretary Cesar Prisma, one of the leading champions of the compact in the Philippines, correctly describes the first compact as going beyond the traditional notion of developmental aid to a more dynamic and modern development paradigm where the people themselves are considered partners in the development process. They become real stakeholders in the development of their communities where they take ownership and responsibility. Third, we're truly proud of what we have accomplished together with MCC and the Millennium Challenge Account-Philippines. If I may quote my good friend, Marivic Añonuevo, CEO of MCA Philippines, let me quote, "We have proven that the Filipino can achieve a 434 million project with great transparency, honesty, integrity, and professionalism," unquote. This has been a truly national effort, as well as a model of development partnership that we hope will be repeated under second compact and in countries around the world in need of developmental assistance. From the officials and workers of agencies such as the Department of Public Works and Highways, Department of Health, and Department of Social Welfare and Development, to entire communities in the hinterlands, to local government officials in Eastern Visayas, to civil society friends, everyone gave so much of themselves and of their talents, efforts, and time in order to ensure that the projects under the compact were accomplished on time and successfully. As Secretary Prisma said in the book commemorating the closing of the first compact, if I may quote, "It is our hope that we can build on our Philippine compact experience and that this island of excellence that MCA Philippines has created will continue to stand as a model of public service and inspire all our government agencies," unquote. Truly, 30 years from when Corazon Aquino became the symbol of political empowerment, it is only fitting that her son, Benigno Simeon Aquino III, our president, has become the symbol of the economic empowerment of the Filipino people in pursuing inclusive growth and investing in the Filipino through projects such as those of the MCC. He has empowered our people to become greater participants and stakeholders in growing the Philippine economy. It is my hope, therefore, that the main lesson you will take away from the Philippine MCC story is not only one of good governance and economic growth, rather, might you share with the rest of the world the inspiring narrative of inclusivity, of a development centered on people, on an investment that reaps dividends with a human face. Let me end by noting that we celebrate this year the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries. It is an important milestone in our history. We have come a long way in the past 7 decades, and the United States remains a strong partner of the Philippines in terms of promoting sustainable economic growth, improving social conditions, expanding trade and investment, and advancing peace and security. The United States have made significant contribution to our country's development throughout the years, in the same way that Filipino Americans have contributed to its growth and prosperity. I think that our relationship in the MCC context, both in terms of the first compact that we just closed and the second compact that we are still developing, best represents the partnership that we have forged as two great nations on opposite shores of the Pacific Ocean. So on behalf of President Benigno Aquino III, the Philippine government, and the Filipino people, I'd like to thank the United States of America, its officials, the Millennium Challenge Corporation for this outstanding development partnership that we have forged. May it last. May it contribute to our progress. May it bring our peoples only closer to each other. Good morning and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Cuisia. Our next panelist is Ambassador Mark Green, who is the president of the International Republican Institute. Ambassador Green earlier served as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Initiative for Global Development. He has also worked with the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition and has been ambassador to Tanzania and a congressman from Wisconsin. Ambassador Green. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking CSIS for hosting today's conversation. I always enjoy being part of the work and activities here. This is an institution that is always pushing forward on development policy and development programs. It's a great place for discussion just like this. I'm also grateful to MCC in general and Dana Hyde in particular for giving me the opportunity to attend the Compact closeout ceremonies in the Philippines. It was not only a new country for me, with all the enjoyment and learning that comes with visiting a country for the first time, but more importantly, it was a great place for me to visit and learn as I finished my service on the board of directors of the Millennium Challenge Corporation. What I saw in Manila and Barugo and elsewhere is a reminder of what a difference the MCC model can make in the lives and livelihoods of so many families all across a wondrous country like the Philippines. As some of you know, my ties to the MCC go back to before its formal launch. As a member of what we used to call the House International Relations Committee and an early co-author of the original legislation for MCC, I worked closely with the Bush White House to make his vision for a new approach, a new direction in development come alive. We founded the agency on the principles of empowering countries to lead their own development, and at the same time, holding those countries accountable for their commitments to the principles of democracy and good governance, those principles that we all believe are essential to sustainable economic growth. Now, a lot of observers at the time said we were crazy, and those were our supporters. To be honest, as I look back at it in those days, we weren't really sure how long MCC would survive, because in many ways it was a grand experiment. And in the early days of the MCC program, there were moments when things were in doubt. Quite frankly, there were crossroads when decisions could have been made to lower the bar, to water down the indicators. And the good news is that for the most part, I think everybody has held strong. Some were up there, the late lead authors, Henry Hyde and Tom Lantos, two grand old gentlemen of foreign policy. They must be smiling, because what was a grand experiment is now an established and respected tool in U.S. international development. And the lessons we've learned through MCC, through compacts as well as threshold programs, and the reactions to the outcomes and the scorecards that we've seen over the years have not only changed MCC, but I think changed our entire approach to international development, all of our agencies and all of our programs. The model itself has proven to be one of the most effective ways to transform lives and to create opportunity around the world. Today, MCC has invested more than $11 billion in projects across the globe. And as Dana said, it's playing an increasingly large role in Asia. The agency's investments in infrastructure and policy reform in Asia have surpassed $1 billion, and that's just in the last 5 years, and it's likely to increase by yet another $1 billion over the next 5 years. That will make this agency one of the largest U.S. government investors in the region. But those numbers, in many ways, at least from my perspective, tell only a small part of the story. I've been to closeout ceremonies in several countries, and I have visited other countries shortly after compacts have wound down. And it's never the roads, it's never the concrete, never the megawatts produced. That's never the greatest source of pride or the most lasting impact, and you heard the ambassador touch upon it. It's the fact that the pressures guidelines, and requirements of the compact model have taught country-led teams how to deliver large public projects on time, under budget, with complete transparency, and according to world-class standards. The members of these teams are ready to apply those lessons to propel their countries toward life-changing development through economic growth. That's what I saw in the Philippines, and that, to me, in many ways, is the true heartwarming part of this story. I was impressed by Marivic and her team, and even more impressed with how the communities involved embraced the challenges that the compact presented. I was impressed with the willingness of the national government to take up and implement key policy reforms, such as at the Bureau of Internal Revenue, which are now helping the government capture revenues that they're owed, but also to ensure that taxpayers are treated fairly. Back in my old days, when I was ambassador to Tanzania, I oversaw the implementation of a compact in Tanzania. And I remember very well attitudes from the government towards all that would be involved in a compact. The day after President Bush signed the compact in Dar es Salaam, it was as if someone was coming to me looking for, that famous giant check like you see in the TV ads, that they could somehow rush down to the bank and cash. And of course, that's not quite the way that MCC works. Money flows as reforms are undertaken. And when I was asked about that, I said, well, think of it this way. A wedding is easy and a marriage is hard. You sign the compact and that's when you cut the wedding cake. And then after that, the work begins. And I think it's fair to say that the Philippines had a number of very significant policy reforms to undertake, a new way of doing development, and I cannot overstate how challenging those reforms can be. But the Philippines not only delivered, but they delivered in a remarkable way that is making them a great partner, we hope and believe, going forward for a second compact. As President Aquino said at the closeout ceremony in Manila, the large-scale transformation of the Philippines that you see today is the result of millions of Filipinos engaged in reform, determined to give rise to a better future for all. At this point, as I've referenced, we're not merely at a compact's completion, but we're also on the cusp, we hope, of a second compact. And the board has given green light to exploring a new compact, to doing that constraints analysis, and hopefully forging a new relationship, a new partnership for development. Now understand that the standards that will be built into that second compact are even higher, and the reforms that will be undertaken are even greater. So the challenges are greater. But I think it's a remarkable sign that the government of the Philippines and the people of the Philippines are enthusiastically embracing the challenges that a second compact will bring. As I said at the closeout ceremonies myself, I tried to remind people there are many countries around the world that would like to be part of a compact, but relatively few ever qualify. Of those small number that qualify, even fewer qualify for and are selected for a second compact. But everything that I saw in my travels and heard in my conversations tells me that the Philippines is up for it. I expect good things are going to happen, and I'm very hopeful in 5 years and some months we'll all be gathered here to celebrate yet another compact and all that it's brought, not just in terms of infrastructure, but in the kinds of reforms that will continue to make the Philippines a shining economic star. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Green. Our next speaker is Marivic Añonuevo. Sorry, you got a tough name for me. But she's the managing director of the Millennium Challenge Account in the Philippines. So she's been one of the actual implementers on the ground. Prior to joining the MCA in the Philippines, she spent 28 years in private sector with Ayala Land, and also served as a senior vice president and head of Ayala Malls Group. Marivic, please.
Good morning, everyone. It has been 2 weeks since the Philippine Compact ended on May 25. At the close of business on that day, our 5-year implementation clock stopped. At this point, we have established the groundwork for full impact evaluation to measure the results and outcomes of the Compact projects. For the medium to long term, there will be a rigorous analysis of the economic rate of return of rehabilitating a 222-kilometer road network in 2 of the poorest provinces in the Philippines, and of building about 4,000 community-driven development projects in 160 poor municipalities, with nearly 5 million beneficiaries, or of reforming the country's revenue administration system. The results of the impact evaluation will hopefully provide reliable and accurate programmatic information and data for evidence-based decision-making for future MCA projects. Notwithstanding a full-blown impact evaluation of the Compact projects over the next few years, our present qualitative evidence point to an interesting result of our anti-poverty projects, and that of the transformation of lives in our project beneficiaries. Indeed, the real success of the Compact is how we have transformed the lives of the Filipino people in our community beneficiaries. From being the quiet, sometimes neglected village folks, they have been empowered to take development into their own hands. We have unleashed their potential capabilities. We have made them realize that poverty is not an excuse to be complacent with their state, that they can rise above their current state. As they take ownership of the projects they have built, whether farm-to-market roads, daycare centers, hanging bridges, or water systems in the villages, or the 222-kilometer road in Samar and Eastern Samar, or the technology-related system reforms in the Bureau of Internal Revenue, and the Revenue Integrity Protection Service of the Department of Finance, our beneficiaries have committed to a long-term maintenance and sustainability of project gains. Focus on sustainability is not only for physical infrastructure constructed in the villages, but also for lessons learned, experiences gained, and values inculcated within themselves. Through the 5 years that MCA Philippines managed a $434 million grant from MCC, we were guided by the values of transparency, honesty, and integrity. These are the same values that we instilled in the minds of our officers and employees, implementing entity partners, our contractors, and other project stakeholders. We all signed an integrity pledge as our commitment to ethical business practices and good corporate governance. We required our contractors and subcontractors to sign the same integrity pledge as part of their standard procedures for the bidding and procurement of supplies, materials, equipment, and construction. We are proud to say that all throughout the 5 years, we undertook all required processes without any hint or trace of tarnished reputation or corruption. We have proven that the Filipino can manage a project with honesty, transparency, and integrity. Looking forward, our project beneficiaries have put in place mechanisms to take care of and maintain their own projects. In the secondary National Roads Development Project, people's organizations have been formed for a community-managed road maintenance program. In our community-driven development project, village councils have established operations and maintenance manuals, the implementation of which is financially supported by the local government unit. In the Revenue Administration Reform Project, officials and employees of the Bureau of Internal Revenue have embraced the needed change to enhance the agency's image and reputation, and in the process, improve tax revenue collections. We are also confident that the transformation in the lives of our project beneficiaries will be generational, as their stories of empowerment and community participation will be told and retold. As one anecdote goes, two school children were talking about their newly built school. One child tells the other, "My father volunteered to help in the construction of our school." The other one replies, "My father too was a carpenter volunteer, and on other days, my mother helped in sieving sand." On behalf of our project beneficiaries in the Philippines, I wish to thank the U.S. government and the American people for their generosity in extending the $434 million grant to help reduce poverty in my country. The first compact may have ended, but our legacy to uplift the lives of the Filipino will stay for a long time in the minds and hearts of the Filipinos. So as we close the book on the first compact, I am very excited about the future and what it will bring. Thank you and good day.
So thank you very much, Marivic. Now we're going to open the floor to the audience. Please wait. Are we going to have microphones? Yeah, okay. So please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you, and then identify yourself, and hopefully you have a question.
John Maestro, U.S. Philippine Society. My question to Ms. Añonuevo. Interesting, you come from the private sector. Are you satisfied that enough public attention has been dedicated to the results of the Millennium Challenge Corporation's work in the Philippines? In other words, do Filipinos sufficiently know what is going on? Which would be a question as to whether or not the government has sufficiently diffused information about this cooperation.
It's a yes and no. For example, that we really went all out for a public awareness campaign on what we do, and that, should I say, we are more popular or known in the rural settings, of which the beneficiaries got the direct benefits from this compact. But as we went through the 5-year cycle, we really had a very conscious effort of going all out to the media and spreading the gospel of the Millennium Challenge Compact and what it has done to our countrymen. Maybe we need to really sound more our trumpets, but I think we have done some dent in the public awareness of what the MCC has done.
Other questions? Please.
Hello, Pete Troilo with DevEx. I'm an 8-year resident of the Philippines. Nice to see you, Marivic, again, and Ambassador. Is there evidence on your end that this next administration will take some of the great reforms pushed by MCC and MCA and carry them on? As you know, throughout, in the 6-year terms, as political winds change in the Philippines, very complex dynamics there, some of these even very positive programs and reforms tend to get discontinued for fear that the successes will be attributed to the previous administration. Do you believe that there's enough roots for the MCC programs to continue, as well as other development programs that have been successful under the Aquino administration?
I think it would be foolish for any administration not to welcome development aid. It is also good news that the incoming Secretary of Finance is very open to these kinds of development programs. He's been with the government also, previous Cory Aquino government, and Secretary Purisima himself tells me that we are at least of the same mind, and that I think he's a great influencer with the incoming administration. So I think we're all set.
If I may add to that, I agree with Marivic that it's good that we have an incoming finance secretary who will, of course, be on top of this MCC compact as one of its champions. Someone who also understands the issues and concerns from the agriculture sector, because he was Secretary of Agriculture under the Cory Aquino administration. And as Marivic said, incoming Finance Secretary Dominguez has the ear of the President-elect. So he's going to be a very key advisor to the new President, and I believe he will also play a very significant role in the Duterte administration.
Is the mic coming?
I'm sorry. What projects or initiatives will the second compact have?
Maybe I will direct it to Evan Freund, our second compact MCC director.
Thank you. My name is Evan Freund. I'm the director, country team lead for the second program. As has been mentioned on a number of occasions, it is sort of very early on in the process of developing our program with the Philippines. That said, we are looking at opportunities to stimulate growth in the rural sector. As you know, I think despite tremendous gains made under the previous administration, President Aquino's administration, and great economic growth, there's still some stubborn growth or more growth needed really in the rural sector. So it's an effort of ours to look over and work with our partners over the next year at opportunities to maybe bridge some of the divides between the rural economy and some of the urban growth centers that are emerging across the country. So we're making efforts to explore opportunities to enhance agricultural competitiveness, agricultural productivity, not just within the Philippines itself, but also within the ASEAN region and further afield internationally for particular agricultural commodities and value chains as they emerge. So we have a real challenge ahead of us. We would like, obviously, to capture the gains that have been made under the first compact and explore possibilities for adding value as MCC to contributing to economic growth in these particular areas. So the next year or so we'll be spending in a period of detailed project development, project appraisal, due diligence of infrastructure, agriculture, and of course policy reform related activities that again can really maximize the gains that we've created under the first compact and also help move the needle to a certain degree on rural economic development and agricultural competitiveness. Thanks.
If I can add to that, it's important to understand that with the MCC model, it's based upon objective analysis. This is not like other programs in other places that are decided on political grounds or decided upon, you know, you know, where people come from in terms of elected officials. This is based upon an objective constraints analysis and constraints to growth analysis that's undertaken jointly by the government of the Philippines and the Millennium Challenge Corporation, and identifying those constraints to growth and prosperity. And then it's working together to identify them and to see what fits within the parameters of the numbers. You know, that to me is one of the most important parts of this. It truly is. You know, but we all talk about country ownership and country leadership in programs, but nowhere is that more true than in a compact. A compact is, just as it sounds, an agreement, an arrangement, set of conditions taken between two equal partners. Both have their obligations. And I guess even hearkening back to the previous question about whether or not an incoming administration will pick up on things. Remember, the program's voluntary. Nobody has to take the money. Nobody has to undertake these reforms. They're developed jointly. They're signed to by both governments as essentially a joint venture, and that's the way that it should be looked at. It should be looked at as a true partnership, a true joint venture to undertake big things both policy reforms and development outcomes that have been identified by objective analysis as being a constraint to growth for the Philippines.
Questions? Please.
Hi, I'm Carlo Gavino with Nathan Associates. I have a question for Ms. Añonuevo. What were some major challenges or barriers that you faced in implementing reform, and were they foreseen? And in particular, if you could speak to challenges or barriers in enacting reforms with the BIR. Thank you.
Well, you could talk about the challenges that we have. Oh, by the way, that's our middle name. First of all, in the community-led development, we were working really with rural folks, with volunteers, and then we taught them how to do feasibility studies, and we taught them how to do project implementation. But they came through, but the challenges came in, let's say, their signatures weren't consistent when they did payroll, so little things like those. But no challenge whatsoever in overseeing that the projects were implemented, no ghost projects whatsoever. Let's see, in the secondary National Roads Development Project, the biggest challenge was that Haiyan, Yolanda came right smack in a road project, and our consultant here, John, would know that though the road that we had built was not really affected, the people there, some died. Some of our workers had died, and construction was halted simply because of that, the history-making weather. And then landslides came, which were not in the original compact. So we had to do some more slope protection and all those engineering gobbledygook of John MacDonald. And the third one, may I talk about the third and fourth? The third one, Bureau of Internal Revenue. We went there to make changes. And of course, change is always very challenging. There was some resistance at first, but because of the leadership from the top, everybody fell in line, and we were able to achieve. Plus the fact that it was an IT system that we were putting in place. As you know, we want to reduce the revenue agent and public facing, so that it will be as objective as possible and less corruption. Then we had also the Revenue Integrity Protection Service, which we capacitated. We gave them all the tools that they would need, and they came through. So we've increased and done our indicating tracking table, that we've increased cases cases of people being investigated in the two key revenue-generating areas of Bureau of Internal Revenue and Bureau of Customs, and we met our targets.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Please.
Just real quick on the road in Samar. How are land rights and right-of-way issues handled? As you know, in the context of infrastructure development being so critical, and the fact that that is a major issue in Metro Manila and all across the country, how were you able to sort of mitigate some of those risks?
MCC actually had given us budgets for really compensating project-affected persons, project-affected entities, and surprisingly, you could count with your hands over around 15,000 project-affected entities, and we were able to really come up with a resettlement program that was accepted by the people, where first of all, we had a very intensive public awareness campaign again, with 14 municipalities and 1 city that were involved. We went to the rural areas, down to the village level, telling them about the benefits and the processes that we were going through, and that we were going to be fair in giving compensation for those that would be affected in the right-of-way. But land was never bought because that is government property. And it was only the structures that were affected that we gave resettlement compensation.
Ambassador Green, could I just ask you, as you mentioned in your talk, that you've been at quite a number of the ending of compacts. Could you compare what you saw recently in your on how you think the Philippines project went and compare it with others that you have seen? Is there any areas in which you can compare these projects, or are they just so unique to each environment that there's not much that can be said on how the Philippines did compared to others?
Well, one thing I can say is that I think, I'd mentioned earlier that in the life of the MCC, lessons have been learned, including by MCC. I think our compacts are better than they were when we first started off, understanding that when we began with compacts, no one else was doing them, so we were literally starting from scratch. So I think this compact was better designed, perhaps, than some of the earlier compacts, which was very helpful. But in terms of the actual projects themselves, something that Marivic pointed to that I guess I'd like to lift up and really emphasize. The ceremonies were in Manila, but then we got out of Manila and went to one of the other islands, more rural areas, and undertaking a public works project that is time-specific, entirely transparent, and having to work with the crazy rules of the U.S. government and technology requirements that go with that, it's hard to overstate what an accomplishment it is in a rural area for that to get done. To go from, I won't say zero, but to go from 5 miles an hour to 60 in a relatively short period of time, that's really something. You heard her talk about project management skills. Okay, how many people here could do the project management? I couldn't. Right? So the Filipino people really came together, particularly in rural areas where there are even more challenges of infrastructure and experience. What they pulled off is really something. And I think that's something that I took away here that I thought was truly unique. Every set of ceremonies that I've gone to, and every country that has recently completed a compact, has a sense of pride over the physical manifestations of the relationship. In Ghana, I saw a highway that they celebrated because it provided tremendous relief from traffic congestion. And you saw some of that here. Clearly, Dana made reference to the footbridge. And by the way, you should take a look at before and after. Dana was polite in saying that it was a not such good footbridge. Literally a plank going across. And imagine a woman going into labor trying to cross that in a hurry. It really was something. But none of that was it. That's not what I saw and felt there. Sure, people were delighted that they now have a new footbridge, and they were delighted at the health facility. They were far more delighted that they had done it. That's what I saw. I saw in those rural areas a tremendous source of pride and accomplishment at being able to take on all of the reforms that were involved. And that was a little bit distinct in this compact. I really saw a great sense of accomplishment in the people that were involved in administering it. You always see that to some extent, but in this one it was alive. It was hard to avoid. Everywhere you went, people were basically saying to you, look, we did this. And that's, I think, something that was special from this compact.
If I may add to that question, Mary, it's Daniel Johannes, the former CEO of MCC, when he met with the Secretary of Prisma, said that MCC was very impressed with the performance of the Philippine, and he attributed also to the leadership of Finance Secretary Purisima and Budget Secretary Butchabad in seeing to it that the Philippine government met its commitments to MCC. So I was very pleased, of course, to hear that from Mr. Johannes himself. Thank you.
Okay, please, we're going to thank our guests, Ambassador Cuisia, Ambassador Green, and Ms. Marivic. Thank you very much for helping us get a better grip on understanding of the MCC projects in the Philippines. So thank you all. Thank you.